A prince hurls himself from the highest window of his own castle, and the ground refuses to take him. To understand why death keeps turning him away, we have to go back 400 years to the happiest man in Romania. It's the year 1480 in Wallachia. Prince Vlad II rules this land, and he couldn't care less about power, conquest, or gold. He lives for exactly one thing: his wife, Elisabeta. The two of them spend their days completely wrapped up in each other, laughing, teasing, lost in their own little world. As a token of that love, Vlad gives her a little music box, and its melody becomes their private signal. Whenever she wants him near, she cranks the little box and lets the tune carry through the castle. That happiness gets cut short when knights burst in under the command of Captain Targol. The Ottoman army has crossed into their territory, and a strike could come at any hour. The soldiers practically force the prince into his armor and pull him away from his wife. Elisabetta questions whether all this war is even necessary.
Is this war necessary?
And before he goes, she tells him to take care of himself, her prince, her king, her life, because she cannot survive without him. Vlad promises the invaders will pay for interrupting them. With the enemy closing in, he has his men escort Elisabetta to another castle where she'll be safer. He himself stops at the church first. The priest blesses him for battle and urges him to drive out the enemy without mercy. But Vlad has his doubts. He asks whether God can really want this much bloodshed, whether killing hundreds of men can truly be holy work. He says he'll fight in God's name anyway, but he asks for one favor in return. He wants his wife protected no matter what happens, because if she dies, his own life is worth nothing. The priest calls that kind of talk dangerous and reminds him to honor the life the Lord gave him, but he promises to pray for her with everything he has.
No, don't pray. Tell him.
Out in the forest, Elisabetta's escort runs straight into an ambush. An enemy archer hidden in the trees picks off two of her guards with fast, clean shots. The remaining soldiers turn to fight and tell her to ride ahead without them. Meanwhile, on the battlefield, Vlad dumps barrels of oil in the enemy's way and sets the whole line on fire. A burning wall that pins the invading army in place. A brutal fight kicks off, men dying on both sides, blood soaking into the ground. But his forces clearly have the upper hand. With skill and teamwork, they grind out the victory, and soon the victors stand before the enemy king. Their opponents' severed heads raised on spears. The celebration lasts about a minute. A rider brings word that Elisabetta has been attacked, and Vlad drops everything and races to find her. She's galloping at full speed with enemy soldiers on her tail, straight into a stretch called the Forest of Wolves. Thousands of bear traps sit hidden under the snow here. Two of her pursuers get their horses caught in the steel jaws while she weaves through untouched, but her luck runs out when her own horse steps into one and throws her to the ground. The enemies close in around her, carefully testing the snow with their swords so they don't share their comrade's fate. Elisabetta tries to back away and steps right into a trap herself. That's the moment Vlad catches up. His horse goes down in a trap too, so he closes the distance on foot and carves through two soldiers in seconds. The last enemy is already moving on his wife, so the prince throws his sword to stop him. The blade goes through the man and into Elisabetta as well. She looks up at her husband and gives him one soft smile before she dies in his arms. He cradles her body, sobbing, his hands stained red, while his tears fall onto the snow. Grief curdles into rage fast. Vlad storms back to the church and tears into the priest. He asked for one thing, one single thing.
So God is deaf, or you did not play hard enough!
And now his wife is dead, and he never even got to say goodbye. He points out that his soul carries the blood of every enemy he killed in God's name, and he demands a miracle in return. He demands Elisabetta return to the living. The priest says that's impossible, that she rests in heaven now, that he's only a humble messenger with no answers. With a strange calm, Vlad replies that he has a message of his own to deliver. He kills the holy man where he stands and declares that until God gives his wife back, his life is no longer God's to claim. He spreads his arms wide in open defiance. The wind picks up inside the church, thunder and lightning crash outside, while the statue of Christ weeps blood. Vlad just stands there looking proud, while his terrified men drag him out of the sacred hall. The curse has landed. He is no longer human. 400 years later, in 1889, we're in France. A priest arrives at a psychiatric clinic in Paris to meet Dr. Dumont, who admits the hospital administration isn't thrilled about a churchman being here. Science and religion don't exactly mix, but the doctor has a case so delicate, it has the Queen of England herself worried.
The Queen. Exciting.
The two men walk through corridors full of screaming patients being handled roughly by the staff, pass through a steel door, and follow a tunnel down to a sealed chamber where a young woman named Maria is kept in heavy chains. The doctor lays out her story. She's Italian, around 25, and engaged to Henry, the Queen's great-nephew. Since Maria refused to set foot in a church, the ceremony was arranged privately on the family estate, but the groom asked a bishop to come and give the blessing, and the moment she saw him, the bride snapped into violent hysteria, which is how she landed chained in a basement. Her records hold an even stranger detail. Her listed date of birth is 1759, which would make her about 130 years old. Dumont chalks chalks it up to a paperwork mistake. The visitor isn't convinced. He mentions that his order has chased this exact phenomenon for over 400 years, and he personally has put in 30. While they talk, Maria comes to hissing like something feral. The priest leans in for a look at her teeth, 2 unnaturally long fangs. Combine that with the impossible age and the allergy to anything holy, and he says it plainly. The woman in front of them is a vampire, and the first ever taken alive. He explains that these creatures actually handle daylight fine in general. It's the direct rays they can't survive. As proof, he throws the window open, and direct sun instantly scorches her skin. He holds up a crucifix next, and it bursts into flame right before her eyes, which only gets a laugh out of her. Even the doctor has to admit this is beyond science. To get her talking, the priest cuts the finger of Dumont's assistant, Simon, and lets a bit of blood drip into Maria's mouth. She settles immediately. He inspects her neck and spots bite marks, which means she wasn't born this way. Someone turned her, so she's not first generation. The church has been hunting the source of the whole bloodline for centuries and never found him. Hungry for another taste, Maria offers one piece of information. Her master is a prince, and he'll soon come to this city searching for his princess. She laughs and wishes them luck. The priest now knows their real mission: find that princess first, because she's the bait that will draw out the very first vampire. Somewhere far away, a young notary named Jonathan is riding through a dark forest at night. His coach suddenly stops, and the driver refuses to go any further. The wolves come out after dark, and he won't risk his horses. He sets Jonathan down with his bags and a torch, and presses a crucifix into his hand before rolling away. Jonathan admits God isn't something he believes in, and the driver tells him to pray anyway. Divine protection never hurts. So the notary covers the last stretch on foot, glowing wolf eyes tracking him from the darkness until a massive castle rises out of the night. He crosses the bridge, and the gate slams shut behind him on its own. The main doors swing open by themselves, then close once he's inside. Lightning flashes, and for a split second he sees a figure standing on a balcony. The figure vanishes, and a heartbeat later an old man is standing right behind him. Pale skin, white hair, a face that age gave up on long ago. The stranger admits his entrance was a little theatrical, takes Jonathan's torch, and with it lights up the whole hall. He gives his name, Vlad II, ruler of Wallachia, though most people know him as Count Dracula. The Count sits his guests down to eat at a table loaded with food, and Jonathan digs in happily, while his host doesn't touch a thing, saying he'll dine later. When a dish slides across the table toward him with a simple wave of the old man's hand, Jonathan writes it off as a clever trick. He remarks that a castle this size must need a lot of staff, and Dracula confirms he has servants. They just stay hidden from guests. He mentions that in the past he traveled the whole world and ran businesses everywhere, though he's retired now. While Jonathan digs through his bag for paperwork, the Count calmly spears a rat on a fork, crushes it in his bare hand, wrings the blood out over his goblet, and drinks. Jonathan explains why he's come. His firm, through his partner Jenkins, has arranged to purchase an old abbey the Count owns in Paris. The plan is to convert the ruin into a hospital ahead of the World's Fair. As he pulls out more documents, the crucifix from the coachman tumbles out of his bag. Dracula asks if he's a believer, and Jonathan says no, it was just a gift from the driver, a superstitious charm. With a flick of the Count's wrist, the cross skids off the table straight into the flames. An instant later, the old man is standing right beside his guest, announcing that business can wait until tomorrow. It's time for bed. He shows Jonathan to his quarters and lays down one strict rule: do not leave it during the night, under any circumstances. When the notary asks what the danger is, his host explains that old castles hold onto their memories, and memories can haunt a man. Jonathan says he's not superstitious, and the Count leaves him with an ironic apology. Back in the dining hall, Dracula puts music on the gramophone, the same melody the little music box played 400 years ago, and orders one of the stone gargoyles to watch the guest. In his room, Jonathan finds an old book on the castle's history. Inside, there's a drawing of the young prince, but the page with the princess's portrait has been torn out. Back in Paris, the churchman pays a visit to Henry, Maria's fiancé. The worried man asks about her health, and the priest assures him she's physically fine, though the evil inside her hasn't been fully removed yet. While Henry is occupied, the churchman searches Maria's room for clues and finds a hidden page tucked inside a book, the exact page missing from the castle's history book. On it is the portrait of a woman, Princess Elisabetta. At the castle, curiosity wins. Deep into the night, Jonathan slips out of his room, notices light coming from behind a door, and follows a creepy staircase down into a fancy candlelit basement. In the center of the room sits a coffin. He raises the lid, and Dracula is sleeping inside, eyes still shut. The host reminds him he was warned to stay put, and a gargoyle knocks the intruder out cold from behind. When Jonathan comes to, the creatures are chaining him up. Terrified, he calls out to God, and Vlad orders him to be quiet. That name isn't welcome in his castle. He explains his view that God and the devil are just two opposing spirits, identical and equally indifferent, with humans as puppets in their hands. The gargoyles hang the notary upside down, and the Count slices his neck so the blood drips into a waiting bowl. He describes himself as a cursed soul, doomed to wander forever and survive on human blood, preferably human anyway. Trembling, Jonathan asks how a loving God could ever allow a creature like this to exist. Dracula reminds him he claimed to be a non-believer, and the young man insists that has changed. He believes now.
I am now.
That gets a laugh out of the Count, a harsh, strained, awful sound. and he offers his prisoner one last wish. Jonathan asks to hear his story. The request amuses Dracula so much that he has the gargoyles lower the man down and strap him into a chair. He even jokes that he would have hired Jonathan as his lawyer in another era. The Count starts talking. Life is a hard road, he says, and death is a privilege, one that God withholds from him despite a lifetime spent as his faithful servant. He remembers Elisabetta's funeral, how his army tried to comfort him, and how he only wanted to be alone. He has waited 400 years for her because pure souls can be reborn, and no soul was purer than hers. The catch is that nobody knows where or when. The search was miserable. The Black Plague swept across Europe and wiped out millions, half of them women, and the survivors packed into holy ground where he isn't welcome. The loneliness ate him alive until he actually envied the dead. He would fall asleep on his wife's grave, and one morning he woke up so hollowed out that he walked to a window and tried to end it all. He survived the fall. He climbed the stairs and did it again and again, over and over, and every single time the curse held. Death simply refused him. Eventually, even the wish for death burned out, leaving nothing but numbness. He couldn't comb the whole planet alone, so he decided to make his wife come to him. He shows Jonathan a fancy vial, and when the notary asks if it's poison, the Count corrects him. It's a fragrance he spent more than a century perfecting. He traveled to Baghdad, famous for legendary flower gardens said to hold 1,001 blooms, then on to India, where he mastered pulling the soul out of the most delicate blossoms, then through the flower fields of France, and finally to Italy, where the formula came together in Florence. He tried it out, on the spot, and every woman in the place turned and swarmed him, some even wandering in from the street. The scent was more powerful than he'd ever imagined. For years, he toured the royal courts of Europe wearing it, making entire ballrooms dance in perfect unison under his control, and he admits that stretch of his life wasn't entirely unpleasant. His journey ended at Versailles, where King Louis, whichever number it was, had gathered all his nobles in one place. Vlad was certain that if Elisabetta had returned anywhere, it would be there. He got closer than ever before. He approached a woman named Isabel, convinced the hunt was over, and when she turned around, he saw a stranger's face. The mistake crushed him. He wept, and at last, he saw clearly that he'd been drowning in parties, alcohol, and debauchery with no actual love anywhere in it. So he quit searching himself and decided others would do it for him. Right there in the middle of that glittering party, he bared his fangs and started biting woman after woman across the hall, one wig tumbling off to reveal long red hair as he fed. He turned only women that night, never a single man, and Maria was among them. When Jonathan asked how many he turned, the Count says the number doesn't matter. Every one of them failed, just like he did. Afterward, he went back to Elisabetta's grave one more time. He shoved the lid aside, smashed the coffin open with his fists, and found nothing inside but ashes. The sight broke something in him for good. He swore off ever leaving the castle. From that point on, the gargoyles brought him endless riches and served his every command, none of it meaning anything, while his vampires kept combing the world for his wife's reborn soul. Back in the present day, Jonathan tells the Count he understands that kind of devotion better than he might think, because he's in love too, with his own wedding coming up. He begs for mercy. If he dies here, his bride will be destroyed by grief and feel exactly what the Count has felt for centuries. He offers up the locket around his neck. The gargoyles carry it to their master, and when Dracula opens it and sees the photograph inside, he goes completely still. He hears Elisabetta's voice. The woman in the picture is the mirror image of his wife. Jonathan corrects him, insisting her name is Mina, but the Count grabs him and declares that this woman belongs to him. He decides to spare the notary's life as payment for bringing his love back to him, has him locked away, and starts shouting orders at his servants. He wants his vial refilled, his horses fetched, and fresh blood in quantity, because he intends to look beautiful when he meets Elisabetta again. Letters go out through his servants to prepare the way. In Paris, the priest brings the torn portrait page to Dumont and explains that Dracula has been hunting this woman's reincarnation for over 400 years. If they find her first, she becomes the lure that pulls him into the open. The doctor studies the drawing and notices the princess favored her left hand, which he confirms with some admiration. He then reads out of a German volume that collects everything his congregation has learned. Vampires are the product of a divine curse. God gives life and holds the power to end it, but he may refuse that mercy when the offense is grave enough. Blasphemy, like running a priest through and renouncing heaven. The offender is condemned to walk the earth forever, but there's a way out. God can forgive, and if the sinner truly repents, death is granted and the curse lifts. Even better, if the source dies, every vampire he ever created becomes human again. Dumont asks how you kill such a creature, and the churchman answers like it's nothing special. You hammer a stake through his heart and take the head off. The book also claims garlic drives vampires away, though he doesn't buy that part. Right on cue, a young assistant walks in, glances at the portrait, and mentions that a woman who looks exactly like that has been sitting in the visiting area. Both men rush out, and there she is. In this life, she goes by Mina, and she's come to check on her friend Maria. She explains that the two of them met just days earlier at a reception through her fiancé, and Maria attached herself to her immediately, always wanting to be close, always talking about love. Everything was fine until the wedding, when one look at the bishop sent her friend into a frenzy. As the conversation warms up, Mina admits something more personal. Her engagement to Jonathan happened fast, maybe too fast, and to her it feels like a bad sign. She loves him, she says, but she's always had the strange sense of being born into the wrong era. She's embarrassed by how it sounds, but the priest tells her it's quite the contrary. Before leaving, she writes down her boarding house address, writing with her left hand the though she mentions she was trained to use her right. She also asks to say a prayer for Maria in the chapel on her way out. Meanwhile, Dracula turns up at an old abbey, dressed as a starving, freezing beggar.
I have no shelter and have not eaten for centuries.
The kind-hearted nuns take him in. One sister comes back with a bowl of soup and freezes in horror. The beggar is standing before the crucifix with his disguise gone, and she knows exactly who he is. She drops the plate and warns him that his tricks count for nothing inside God's house. The Count turns down the humble soup, asks for something more refined, and proves her wrong. He sprays his perfume across the figure of Christ while mockingly reciting the names of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Nuns from all over the abbey come drawn to the scent like sleepwalkers. He calls them sisters and accuses them of having hearts of stone as they fight the pull, lose, and crawl to him anyway, collapsing to their knees, piling around him in a desperate heap. One of them pulls back her veil and offers herself first. He feeds on them without hesitation. Over at the castle, Jonathan sees the Count's coffin being carried out and realizes his host is gone, which means the monster is heading for Mina. He makes his move. He throws a blanket over some tools across the room, drags them close, and breaks his chains, then makes a rope from fabric and climbs out the window. A gargoyle bursts in and slashes his support, and the notary barely catches himself on the icy wall. The creatures jab at him through gaps in the stone, and one finally lands a hook on him and knocks him loose. He tumbles down into the snow and slides out onto a frozen lake. One gargoyle jumps down after him, and the ice cracks under its stone weight and swallows it whole. The others refuse to follow. Jonathan picks himself up, hurt but alive, and walks away across the ice. Sometime after that, Dracula turns up at the clinic looking young, healthy, and handsome again. All that stolen blood doing its work. The people inside stare at him with something like reverence. A whiff of his perfume puts Simon completely under his control, and the assistant leads him straight down to Maria's cell. She weeps with joy at the sight of her master and tells him the news. She has found Elisabetta. As a reward, the Count hands over the hypnotized assistant and lets her feed. He sets his loyal vampire free and walks her out. The next morning, deep in his research, the priest comes across an aged portrait of Vlad, and before he can act on it, he's urgently summoned to the clinic. Dumont reports that Maria has vanished after knocking out 3 guards, and Simon, drained nearly dry, has turned. The new vampire is strapped to a bed, fangs already grown, a powerful fragrance still clinging to his clothes. The priest recognizes the scent instantly. Witnesses describe the intruder who freed Maria as a tall, elegant man with blue eyes. The priest puts it together and realizes Mina is in terrible danger. Over at her boarding house, Mina hears a knock and opens the door to a shock. Maria is standing there, healthy, radiant, beautifully dressed. She claims her illness vanished as fast as it arrived, and the doctors signed her release, and she doesn't want to talk about it any further. When Mina asks about Henry, her friend answers vaguely that he might be in Scotland. Instead, she produces 3 tickets to tonight's celebration. Mina asks why 3, and Maria explains that a friend of hers is dying to meet her. She insists Mina change into nicer clothes right away, and off they go. Maria brings her to the Grand Hotel, promising the best hot chocolate in the city, and leads her into a packed hall. That's where Dracula appears. The moment he lays eyes on Mina, tears well up. 400 years of waiting standing there alive and breathing. He tells her she lights up the entire room. When she asks if they've met before, he says perhaps in a dream, and she calls that a very romantic thing to say. He introduces himself as Vlad, Prince of Wallachia, though she may call him Count Dracula. He bows over her hand and kisses it, and at his touch, a vision flashes through her. Pieces of some long-gone life at his side. Rattled, she pulls her hand away, and Maria sweeps her off to enjoy the festival, the Count following at a distance. The 2 women wander the fair, trying food and drinks, laughing at the games, gawking at a fake mermaid sideshow, petting the animals. Mina even tries to pull the Count into one of the games before Maria steers her off toward a haunted house, where the dark separates the 2 friends, and Mina gets lost. A fake skeleton lunges at her, and she screams, and out of nowhere the Count is beside her, walking her calmly to the exit. At a shooting booth a little later, he moves in close and teaches her how to aim. And wrapped in his arms, she's hit with another flash of the past, so vivid it aches. As night settles in, he invites both women up to his hotel suite to rest until the fireworks start. From the balcony, there's a view of the whole glittering city. Maria excuses herself to hunt down that hot chocolate, and the Count finally has Mina to himself. She remarks that a place like this suits a king, and he gently corrects her. Only a prince. He learns she comes from a small village and loves the quiet of the countryside, the sounds of nature over the noise of a city. He describes his own home, an old castle in the remote Carpathian mountains, a place of winter and solitude. She says she loves winter, and he suggests that maybe these are memories from another life. She hesitates, but she doesn't quite dismiss it. He brings out the small music box. People credit the Swiss with inventing these much later, he tells her, but this one came off a merchant's table in Constantinople a very long time ago. It was his late wife's. Mina is surprised to learn he was married, and he admits with real weight that he's a widower. She wonders whether it still plays, so he winds it up. The delicate melody fills the suite, and something cracks open inside her. Fragments of memory pour through, blurred, half-formed, achingly familiar, and for a heartbeat, she is Elisabetta. He explains that whenever his wife wanted him near, she would start this exact tune and let it ring through the halls. He calls her Elisabetta, and Mina snaps back, frightened, accusing him of putting some kind of spell on her. The Count apologizes for opening old wounds, says only that her resemblance to his wife stirred up painful memories, and she insists firmly that she's Mina, no one else, and her wedding is a few weeks away. He presses the music box on her anyway, saying no one may refuse a gift. Maria sweeps back and right on time and drags her friend to the balcony for the fireworks. When the night winds down, Dracula sees Mina home. She thanks him for the evening, and he confesses that he hasn't known joy in centuries, that the word itself disappeared along with his wife. She heads inside, glowing, and the smile dies on her face. Jonathan is laid out in the living room, battered and barely conscious, with Dumont and the priest at his side. The churchman explains that her fiancé barely escaped from a castle in Romania, and the castle's owner is a count named Dracula. Mina refuses to believe it. The man she passed the whole evening with was charming, generous, a perfect gentleman who escorted her right to this door. The priest sends the doctor out to look, but the count has already gone. He tells her the rest. Maria was never discharged. She escaped after knocking out the guards and draining a clerk's blood. The man Mina finds so kind is a creature that feeds on human blood, a vampire, and he uses an enchanted perfume that overrides a person's will. Jonathan, stretched out on the sofa, confirms every word with his eyes. Horrified, Mina lets them examine her neck. There are no bite marks, which he greets like a small miracle, and she shuts herself in her room to cry. Alone, she opens the music box again. The melody pulls the visions back stronger than ever, dancing beside a man she adored. Scenes out of a life from centuries back, and she only surfaces when Dracula appears without a sound beside her. She jumps, and he promises he'd never hurt her. Knocking interrupts them. The landlady complaining about music at midnight, and Mina apologizes through the door without giving him away. She demands that he leave, so the count moves toward the window, and she panics. She doesn't know what he can do, and she's convinced he's about to end his own life. So she stops him. He tells her that if she wishes it, he'll disappear forever, but that he has also spent 400 years waiting to stand here. She calls him a sorcerer and accuses him of bewitching her. He admits he bent people with perfumes and powers in the past, but never on her, not once. And to prove it, he pulls the vial from his pocket and hurls it into the flames. What she's feeling is no spell at all, only her own memory. She pushes back. He survives on human blood. He doesn't deny it, but he swears she was never prey to him. She's his love. He lays out the whole truth, the curse, the God he defied, an eternity of darkness handed down because the pain of losing his wife drove him to renounce heaven. When she asks why he dragged her into any of this, he doesn't dodge it. A thin line of blood starts running from Mina's nose. Gently, the count catches it on his fingertips and tastes it, calling it incomparable. And he admits that without blood, he's nothing but a shriveled, feeble old man. She brands him a liar, a fraud, and he simply takes her hands and gives her back her own words from before a battle long ago, that he had to take care of himself, her prince, her king. Mina finishes the line on her own, her life, because she cannot survive without him. Everything floods back at once. She knows him now, remembers being Elisabetta, remembers all of it at once, and she tells him how much she missed him. She calls him her love and kisses him. The two of them fall into each other, and Mina asks for more than one night. She wants immortality. She wants to be his, in flesh and blood. He resists at first, warning that all he can offer her is death, but she says living without him would be the real curse and begs him. The count gives in and buries his fangs in her neck. Downstairs, the priest suddenly catches a familiar scent, the same perfume from the hospital. The count is inside the house, gun in hand. He races up to Mina's room, but it's empty. Nothing left but the count's hat. He and Dumont conclude the vampire has carried her off to his Romanian castle. Jonathan erupts, calling the count a demon that has to be stopped, and volunteers to guide them there. The priest urges calm and points out they'll need help and money for a crusade like this, and he knows exactly who to recruit. That's how they end up at Henry's home, and their timing saves his life. Maria has come back to her fiancé, wrapping him in sweet words and affection to keep him distracted, and she's leaning in to bite when the priest's group bursts through the door. She whirls on them in fury, and the churchman drops her with a gunshot, to Henry's absolute shock. He demands an explanation and gets one when his bride rises again, her voice turned demonic and ethereal. She swats Henry aside like nothing and seizes the priest by the throat. Jonathan spots a sword hanging on the wall, grabs it, and takes her head off in one swing. The head flies across the room and knocks Dumont off his feet, while the body keeps choking the priest before finally collapsing. Even headless, it keeps twitching, so the churchman drives a large metal crucifix through her heart, and Maria is destroyed for good. Henry can barely process it. In Romania, servants carry a coffin into the castle. The count pays the men, tells them their services won't be needed anymore, and says he's finally home. Dracula and Mina climb out of the coffin together, and he walks her through every corner of his world, presenting her to the gargoyles as the princess who has returned at last. Everything has been kept exactly as she left it, including her old dress, preserved for 400 years. Mina puts on Elisabetta's gown and winds up the music box, and when the melody melody drifts through the halls, the Count smiles, telling her that tune was always her way of calling him. Full of emotion, he wonders aloud whether God could ever forgive a love like theirs. Mina answers calmly that God is love and ought to understand them, and if he doesn't, then to hell with it. Outside the gates, the priest's expedition has arrived. The doctor, Henry, Jonathan, and a force of soldiers with cannons. They capture the departing servants, wait for the moment, then rush the entrance and hold the gate open. Cannons open up from the forest while soldiers fire on the front doors and whole sections of the castle start to crumble. Inside, Mina is terrified as cannonballs tear through her ceiling. Dracula tells her to wait inside, promises he'll be back in a minute, and goes out to deal with the invaders. The gargoyles descend on the soldiers and drop them one after another, but the humans have the numbers and the guns, and they keep pushing deeper inside. Jonathan takes his group down to the basement, while troops comb the upper floors. Mina spots them coming and bolts herself in. Down in the basement, the men surround the coffin and empty their weapons into it. It's empty. Dracula appears behind Jonathan, knocks him out cold, and calls him ungrateful, reminding him that he promised to spare his life once and shouldn't be made to break his word. He turns on the soldiers, sword drawn, and cuts through them like they're standing still. Precise strikes, one man after another, and when reinforcements pour in, he kills them just as fast. Henry seizes his chance and fires 2 pistols at the Count at once. The bullets do nothing. Dracula leaps on him and tears into his neck. One flick of his hand slams the doors shut, sealing out the rest of the soldiers, and he levels his sword at the priest's chest. The priest doesn't flinch. The Count recognizes him as the man who has chased his people for years, and he admits it, though he says he didn't come to fight. Dracula answers that his war is with God, not God's messengers. The correction comes back quietly. He isn't fighting God, he's fighting himself. Vlad protests that he once killed in God's name, and the churchman asks why God would ever want his own creations destroyed. Men kill for themselves, in their own name, exactly like he's doing right now. Dracula admits those are pretty words, but insists God sent this man to kill him. The churchman replies that God sent him here to save him, not end him. That lands. The vampire goes quiet, and he asks whether 400 years of this was never punishment at all, but time to find his way back. The father tells him his salvation is possible, and Dracula answers that Mina is his salvation. The reply comes back steady and cold, and he is her damnation. Another cannon blast rocks the castle, and Mina screams from her room. Dracula tears off toward her, ordering his gargoyles to hold the line. While they battle in the hallway, he clears every soldier out of the wing, bursts through her door, and pulls her into his arms. He tells her the truth he's just understood. If he goes, the curse goes with him, and she'll be free. She refuses to hear it. He's not her prison, she says. He's her freedom, and her soul still belongs to God, and she begs him not to leave her. The priest catches up, and the Count shuts the door on him. Through it, the churchman tells him that real love means sacrifice. If he stays, every step he takes toward Mina drags her deeper into his darkness. If he really loves his wife, he has to let her go and give himself back to God. Dracula makes his choice. Ignoring Mina's pleas, he steps out of the room and locks her inside. He tells the priest that 400 years ago, he asked a man of God to spare his wife, and God didn't listen. And he asks whether his prayer can be heard this time. The priest answers that whether God hears him or not, only he can change his own destiny, save her, and find peace for eternity. The Count leans back against the door, spreads his arms open, and tells him to hurry before he changes his mind. A prayer is spoken, and the stake goes through the Count's heart. Mina pulls him inside, holding his hands, tears pouring down her face. The curse is lifting, and his true form surfaces, ancient and withered, the centuries catching up in seconds. She never looks away, and she asks him why he did it, and he answers simply, because he loves her. She tells him she loves him too. A moment later, his body crumbles to ash in her arms. Every light and every fire in the castle goes out at once. All across the fortress, the monstrous gargoyles transform, and what steps out of the stone are children, small, confused, blinking, kids who had been cursed into his service, now stumbling out of the castle free. Everyone the Count and his vampires ever bit returns to human. Jonathan comes to and goes looking for his bride, and he finds her weeping over the ashes as they lift off the ground, rising into the air like something is calling them home. He understands what it means. His bride carries Elisabetta's soul, and there's no room for him in that story. He walks away and leaves her in peace. And the priest, his mission complete, departs the ruins as well. Outside, the ashes of Vlad II scatter into the wind and drift toward the sky. So here's the question that stays with me after this one. The man spent 4 centuries at war with heaven over one unanswered prayer, and the only prayer that ever got answered was the one where he stopped asking for himself. Was the whole curse a punishment, or was it just the longest second